As we've been hearing here in Doha, the higher education worldwide is at a turning point. So what we're here to discuss is what happens next. We're going to be talking about the future of higher education with you who've been thinking a lot about that. So it's impossible to talk about the future of higher education without first discussing the demographic shift through which in many parts of the world the nature of students is changing.
In Finland, we've had large companies such as Nokia Siemens Network lay off a lot of people. So we've faced the situation, for instance, in Espoo, where I'm from, which is right next to the capital, Helsinki, we've had people, hundreds of people looking for a new career. And obviously, these are people with substantial experience. So we've had to take a hard look at education because they're not going to want to repeat what all they've done. So we've built programs through recognition of prior learning, etc., which are more sort of individual tracks on how to move on in your life.
There's quite a large number of graduates and young graduates in Korea who are unemployed. So what the government there is doing and putting large sums of money in is to encourage middle-aged workers back to university to upskill the skills that they've got, so enabling the young graduates to enter the labor market.
And how do post-secondary institutions, how should they respond to this? How will they have to change in order to accommodate this new kind of student?
Well, I think the programs have to be a lot more flexible. And again, this sort of a concept of an individual study path, we have to really make that come true. Because without that, I mean, it will be meaningless and people will shy away from education because we need to take a hard look and see what adds value and what will help these people get a new career and move on in their life.
And I think the important thing about the way of approaching it is that confidence is instilled in those students. I mean, if you're coming out of the workforce and going back into university life, that's a kind of risk. And it's the question then of how that risk is dealt with. And the same thing for those younger students who come from families where there's been no experience of higher education.
So how do we do that? How do we instill that confidence in those young people?
First of all, there's the relationship with the teacher. And the relationship with the teacher is really central to this. They have to instill confidence and enable the students to trust them. Trust them in their advice, their direction, their support. But alongside that, I think we also need student support services, counseling services, and we also need, particularly for women, although it should also be for men, creches. We need other ways of supporting families. We need to rethink the role of the state. And we need to rethink it and see it more as an entrepreneurial state. Because, of course, by upgrading the skills and knowledge and understanding of these non-traditional learners, we're actually enabling economies to actually develop themselves.
And I also think it's very much about tapping into the experience that people already have. So a lot of peer-to-peer learning takes place, and we should see that as a richness, really. In Finland, in the applied learning track, we're talking about learning communities, and everybody brings stuff to that community. So everybody is a learner and a teacher. And I think that's fairly important to recognize what we have when we have a bunch of students who are diverse in age and experience.
Well, we've touched on several other trends that are likely to affect the future of higher education. How can we use technology, and particularly online education?
I believe in the blended learning approach because learning is a social process. It is about people connecting. So yes, we can use the digital world and what all we have in it, but that's not the essence of learning. The essence of learning is in the individual and really in the social context. So I don't think that it will, replace learning as it is, but we can definitely add to it, and we can use it to make learning more flexible. And I don't think we're doing that the best possible way yet. So we still have a lot of potential unused there.
I agree with Mervi on this. There is great potential there, but I also have a worry, and the worry is inequality. What I think we might well see is that the elite institutions of this world, the Oxfords, the Cambridge, the Harvards, they will charge enormous sums of money, and indeed are, and the elites will go to those universities. And they will go to those universities because that's the way they socially network. That's the way they develop their connections. For many people, some kind of online learning will be cheaper, But whether they will then have access to the kinds of jobs that those elites have is another matter altogether. It's a problem.
Well, Mirvi, you also touched on another really hot trend in post-secondary education, which is the credentialing process, because you mentioned learning or life experience.
Yes.
And many institutions are beginning to offer credit for life experience. Compensity-based education is the catchphrase in the United States that refers to this. Are we changing the nature of the credentials? Will employers accept something other than a university degree?
Well, basically, the way I see it, it's not necessarily about the degrees vanishing, but it's about focusing on the competences. So the degree itself is a piece of paper, but what's behind it is, again, you touched on the quality issue. So I think it's the quality and the relevance that we need to be aware of. And for instance, in Finland, if we look at the further and specialist qualifications, the professional ones in the applied learning track, they're all learning outcomes based. So employers know and individuals know what's in it. It's not about what we teach, but it's about the learning outcomes, and it is competency-based education. And I think we're going in that direction because then that will sort of open up what's behind the piece of paper, and that's what employers are looking for. Also individuals, so they're not, buying something that they don't really understand what's in it and whether it will add value to them in their career.
I have another two worries about this process. The first worry is that if you break up a traditional degree, as it were, into many smaller subparts, what you will find is that people are trained for very, very specific jobs. And whether they're then trapped in those jobs as technology moves is a further question. But there's a much bigger question behind all that. And that is that when you talk to leading multinational companies, they will talk about talent. And what they mean by talent is a holistic concept. It is not one that can be broken down into separate competencies. They might short test for some of those, but they're looking for something much broader than that. So there's this odd situation we're in now, where on the one hand, for lower level jobs, much more specific kinds of credentials which reflect particular skills and competencies that people might have, but then at the top level, it's something altogether different. And so again, there's a kind of problem about equality here.
I definitely agree with you that it can't be, something pinpointed, and above all, we have to give our students much more. So the promise of being able to go beyond and learn more is very important. When you get a qualification, that's only the beginning. And that serves you for life, yes, up to a point, but not anymore. I mean, the world is changing so rapidly that you're going to have to up your skills again.
Learners seem very much aware of that. There
Yeah.
are people who are going back for further education and for
Sure.
certificates to either enhance their careers, find new jobs, or even just because their employers offered them more compensation if they have these qualifications. But is higher education ready for this onslaught of older learners seeking lifelong education?
I think there are two parts of an answer. I think the first part is probably not, for the reasons that we raised earlier. But there's also another question, which is about the funding of lifelong learning. And when you look at the United States or England, and I'm advisedly saying England, not Great Britain or the United Kingdom, but when you look at England, what's clear is that you get a one-shot chance. There is support if you're an undergraduate, but after that, it becomes much more problematic if you want to go back into some kind of lifelong learning.
Well, in Finland, we're really fortunate because we have built a system where it is possible, and there is flexibility to, work and learn at the same time, develop your career or get a new career. And I think that's really good because if we look at our aging population, that's really our only possibility.
Many of the challenges we've spoken about that confront higher education as it moves ahead require, as you've said, significant investments of resources at the governmental level and at the institutional level. So let me wrap up by asking you, is higher education capable of this level of change?
I think they can. Certainly in the United Kingdom, I'll say the whole lot now, Scotland, Ireland, Wales and England. I think that there's been enormous innovation and flexibility in some respects. However, the cost of that and the burden of that has fallen on young staff. Staff coming in have more and more to do, more and more is expected of them.
I don't think there's really a choice to make. I mean, it is a must. How it's done will depend on the country, will depend on the system, what is available now, what needs to happen, etc. But again, education might change radically through various means, and maybe in the future more and more people will look at their careers and look at education as a puzzle. What piece is missing for me to get ahead, for me to take the next step? So it won't necessarily be about single degrees as in, you know, slam dunk, now it's done, but okay, I'll do this, then there's that step, and then I'll have those pieces of the puzzle put together and it will take me forward. And I think recognition of prior learning and what we're doing already is something that is a good step in that direction.
So a lot of kind of opportunity and a lot of challenges here, and thank you both very much for speaking about this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.